All right. Welcome everyone, and I think it's going to be a very interesting webinar today. We have here today Zinar Salim and Basit Gauri with us. This webinar is particularly going to be talked. We'll have a conversation in detail actually about Fulbright scholarship. Um, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much, the panelists, Basit and Zina, for giving your time and to having this conversation with us here today. So as you know, this webinar is being hosted by Open Education Board for Pakistan. And in the entire webinar, we'll be in detailed talk about various aspects of Fulbright scholarship. So the entire webinar has been actually divided into 3 segments. So we'll go segment by segment, and then at the very end of it, we'll have a question answer session or segment of it, where we will take all the questions. We'll try to take all the questions of our various team audience present here. So the first segment would be about thinking in advance. What kind of thinking goes into career, into education prior we apply to Fulbright. The second segment will be about applying to Fulbright scholarship and what kind of effort or assistance is required or goes into in the application process of this prestigious award. And the last one will be about life as a Fulbrighter or as Fulbright scholar, where both our panelists will talk about their experiences and their life that they are spending or have spent as a Fulbright scholar. And of course, at the very end, we will have a question answer segment. So before I begin, I'd just like to set up, I'd just like to revisit a few points. It is requested to all of you, to all the people who are who have joined us today on Zoom, that if you want to ask any questions, please feel free to write them down on the chat box. It would be great if you can send directly to me so that I can we can integrate those questions during our discussion, or perhaps we'll have to move into our last segment as well. So send us interesting, exciting, concrete, brief questions as you may, and we're really looking forward to hearing from all of you. So without further ado, I will want, first of all, our panelists to introduce yourself. So if Zinar Salim, if you can please introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Basit Gauri.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, hello everybody, I am Zinar. I am basically from Karachi. I've worked a couple of years in Karachi as a teacher educator, and then I moved to US on Fulbright. It's my third year in Fulbright, and I'm doing my PhD in instructional design, development, and education. Too long a word, but it's basically falling under education or teacher education.
Perfect. That's great. Basit, if you can go next.
Yeah. So hello everyone. Basit here. So I basically went on Fulbright in 2018 and did my master's in energy systems engineering. I have my background in environmental engineering, and I had 3 years industrial experience. Currently based in Islamabad after returning last year in 2020 in around June. I'm currently working in a consultancy for the energy and infrastructure advisory firm. So yeah, I think we can continue now.
Right. It's great to have both of you here today. So just to get a rewind of it, Zinar, you are still in US. You're doing your PhD right now, right? And Basit, you have come back to Pakistan and you are currently situated in Islamabad.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Perfect. So let's start our first segment of this webinar, which is thinking in advance. So the first simple question is that what is Fulbright scholarship? Although I believe that most of the audience would know about it, but just to put it as briefly as possible, how would you define or how would you describe this Fulbright scholarship? So since we last started with Zinar, Basit, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, most of us already know, but just to give a brief overview about Fulbright. So basically, it's a fully funded master's program master's postgraduate program. So it funds masters and PhD students. And it actually covers all your allowances and your tuition fees and your living and transport allowances. But essentially, to me as a Fulbrighter, I think it's much more than that. It's not just about covering your finances. It's about the experience and the exposure you get from it, the kind of network you develop. That's the basic where the essence of Fulbright lays ahead. So yeah, plus essentially, I think it should be mentioned here, like it's kind of like a global program. So we don't have only like, it's like not like a Pakistan and US based thing. It's funded by the US States of Department, but you have like a Fulbright program for India, for Nepal, and for all other countries in the world. And that's the beauty of it, because when you go there, there are certain seminars and certain platforms where you get to meet those Fulbrighters as well. So it's not just like making a network that's national, that's local. In fact, you make it on a global scale. So yeah, that's I think simply what Fulbright has to offer.
Right. Right. Zinar, do you want to add anything?
So yeah, the program that we are in, or Basit actually graduated from, but we are in the Fulbright degree program. But Fulbright also offers a couple of other streams. For example, it offers FLTA, which is for language teachers, so they can get an experience of teaching in US for a couple of months. So that is another stream that is not a fully funded degree program, but it is a program that you can get um, ex- like cultural exchange with. Also, there are other programs. If you look at the USEFP website, there are other programs that Fulbright offers that are not non-degree programs. So in the end, you don't get degree, but you get experience of either working here as a teacher in secondary or primary school, and then or there are other streams to that. I am from teacher education, so my examples would be likely more towards that. But so degree programs, as Bas mentioned, it has postgraduate, so masters and PhD programs are there, but also there are postdoc programs for those who have already had a PhD, so they can get into that exploration of that pieces. Yeah, I think I've shared the website for further exploration.
Right, right, perfect, and thank you so much for sharing the website as well. So just to make it clear for everyone who is listening to us right now, this scholarship is not for undergraduate studies. It is only for post graduate scholars or students who want to pursue post graduation. Right?
So yes and no. So there is a UGrad program which is for undergrads. So the scholarship that we went in 2018 was for masters and PhD. So the second link that you see is the Fulbright degree program. But there, as I said, that beyond this degree program, which is a center for our discussion today, there are other programs like UGrad, FLTA, and others.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. All right. So let's take a step back from Fulbright, and if both of you perhaps can talk about the thinking process that goes into prior applying to Fulbright. So the first question perhaps would be that how do you plan out your path? How do you plan out your education, your career in order to get into Fulbright? So what are those prerequisites, perhaps I may say, that are required, or that you may say that every applicant should do before they think about Fulbright scholarship? So perhaps if we can again start with Basit.
Yeah, sure. So I think the very question that you have asked is actually the first step in itself, which usually in our case we miss that. So we at our undergrad level, we usually do not ask that question, okay, what is it? I want to set a roadmap to my career goals. So I think that's the first step where you need to start off from. During your degree program, during your bachelor's, you need to start thinking about what you're going to do ahead. And it's the roadmap exactly would probably be mostly will be unique to everyone. So it's not like one roadmap, you go anywhere. You have to find your own roadmap to it. But the idea behind is that initially you need to start thinking about where you want to be in upcoming 10 years, which sector you want to make an impact at. And that's essentially very important to Fulbright as well. When you go down into when we might probably will talk about the application process and the thinking process that's required for the application as well. Um, it's very much important that you have those goals, those visions, what you want to do with your life, in which sector you want to make an impact at, have those things on your mind beforehand. Because it gives you a lot of time as well to do things and to take actions that lead towards those goals. Secondly, I think we do need to think over the place of Fulbright into your goals. So how Fulbright comes in helping you achieving those goals. So you don't start off from like, usually what we do is like, I want to graduate. Okay, it's a free and funded scholarship, so I just want to go there. I don't think that's probably the right approach. Almost it's the mostly used approach here, right? In fact, it was my approach as well. But it's not the right approach now that I know. The right approach is basically you come up with a very as concrete as possible. If you can set up your goals, your life goals, your career goals, where you want to be, in which sector you want to work, then you ask yourself these questions. Okay, how I can achieve those goals? So let's, for instance, I want to find a cure for cancer, or I want to do something big. So there's no limit to that. Okay, you have those goals, you have those vision in mind, and now that you want to ask your question, how I can do that? What are the things I might require? So in sometimes it might not make much sense to even go for such kind of a program. So for instance, I can give you an example like entrepreneurship. So if you have a career like that, it's much more market based than having an academic background based. So how much you spend your time in learning from the market and from talking and from the exposure part, that's much more important in those cases, in those kind of careers. So it's very important that you set those barriers, and then you see that, okay, if do I need to go for the master's, and if I do need to go for, do I need an experience beforehand? So you set your timeline based on that. But in specifically in the case of a Fulbright, because the application process itself is a year-long process. So I think if you want to have like a 1 year gap, 2 years gap, I had like 3 years gap before going on a Fulbright between my bachelor's and my master's. And I was thankful that I did that, because it actually made me realize that, okay, I shifted kind of a transition from environment to energy. And that 3 years period actually gave me that idea that, okay, that's the sector where I want to work in, because I wasn't clear when I completed my bachelor's. So I think it's very important that you ask these questions in mind before you are actually applying for the Fulbright or any other program.
Right. I think it's very important. Of course, you have emphasized upon it in both your points that everyone who is thinking to apply to Fulbright need to create a roadmap beforehand. So Zinar, what's your thought about on it?
So I concur with Basit. I have similar thoughts. Just to add on, when I was planning, my eyes were not only on Fulbright. So I needed a PhD so badly that I was like, wherever, right? I will apply all across. So I applied in Australia, and I literally did. So 2 universities in Australia, I applied in UK, and I applied in Fulbright. So it's like, I want this, and Fulbright is one way to go towards this goal. So, and where did that energy come from that, I want this particular thing? It's from my work experience. Basit has also said similarly that he worked in the setup. I also worked in the setup I was working since I was 18. So I started my career as a teacher, and then at a very local school, my first pay was like around 1,200 rupees. So, and I started my journey there. I didn't know anything about Fulbright. well, I didn't even know the name. It
Mm.
was, and then I did my bachelor's in education, did my master's in education. In my master's, once I completed my master's and I was working for a university, then I came across this, the pamphlet saying Fulbright scholarship. I was like, this looks interesting. So I looked at it and in 2016 or late 2015, and I was like, it offers masters and it offers PhD. Which one do you want to hit for? PhD. Okay. So now do your MPhil first. So 2 years of MPhil into the preparation so that I get ready for PhD, because at that time it was required that you have 18 years of education to get into a PhD program, and the requirements keep on changing. So I would like you to visit the website before making any decisions. So I did my MPhil in preparation for PhD, and then did my GRE, and we will talk about that in admission process. So yeah, I think Fulbright is one pathway. If you even don't get it, if you have a goal, you figure out other ways to achieve that goal. So goal is more important than the scholarship itself.
Right. So in your case, as you mentioned, that your focus was more on the PhD, on getting the degree, and Fulbright was a pathway to getting to that degree. And I think this is exactly what perhaps all the Fulbrighters also say, that they should plan out their paths accordingly. They should focus on the degree. They should focus on the sector that they want to get into, and then work their way through this scholarship. It's great. Basit, I think Zinar has in detail talked about her experience as well and how she planned out her career and her roadmap towards Fulbright. If you can also briefly touch upon your experience and on the very process that you went through while planning your pathway to Fulbright.
So yeah, so my experience in terms of how I came about applying for a Fulbright is a little bit different from Zina, right? That's it. So I knew about Fulbright way beforehand when I even was starting my bachelor's, but I never thought of going into it. So it was like having that very exotic dream or something like that that you can't possibly achieve, and because you just think like it's for the top notch people, the cream, and people who are perfect at everything,
Intellectuals.
very high intellectual people, and only for those. And I was like, I'm just a normal guy. I don't fall among those category of men. And I didn't apply for the Fulbright when I was done with my bachelor's. And I had the same mindset. What got me changed, initially at that time, we didn't have these kind of webinars or like exposure from the people around us. But definitely what got changed was because I saw people surrounding me who I knew that their intellectual level matches mine. Um, and they're just like every other person like us. And I saw them getting a Fulbright. And that's when I talked to them. And I actually asked, okay, what does it actually take to get it to be a Fulbright? And when they told us all these things, that you don't have to be that a choka guy, a nerdy guy, or a guy who's perfect at everything. You just need to have that kind of a motivation, a plan in your mind. That's it. You have a plan in your mind, you can get it. So that's where ultimately, and during those time, I was also, as I said, the transitioning from not I would say transitioning, it's kind of like interdisciplinary field from energy and environment. So I was going through that phase as well, where I was trying to get into an energy industry as well, but I wanted to have some kind of an academic background, a base ground that's strong enough so that I can be a expert in the energy industry as well. So I needed to go for a higher education for that. So that one plus this Fulbright thing, the exposure it got, and when I talked to my seniors who got into Fulbright, their life experience, their journey that they went through, the kind of exposure stories they told me, I was like, okay, this is the place where I want to go. This is where I want to do, because it's kind of like the perfect way. It's like a life milestone, not a career milestone. For me, it was. So that's how I end up, applying for the Fulbright itself. A pretty, you can say, a normal story, I would say, because I've seen the reason I say that because I have many people that I've met after getting into Fulbright who have that same question in mind. Who are not that very sharp academically. I was sharp. I got above 3.5, but still I thought like, okay, it's for the chalkas. But then there are people who don't even have like that much stronger academic GPA or that kind of a background, and they're like, okay, now what do I do? I don't think Fulbright is for me. I'm not very fluent in English. Yes, there are basic requirements and you are going to retest, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. And the example of that is basically a couple of people who I know with a much more, I would say, below average scores, or you can say academic background, the qualifications that are quantitative, much below, but once they had this thing in mind and they were told, need to have this idea, you need to work harder for it than a normal person, but it doesn't mean that it's not approachable. And I saw those people getting into the Fulbright after me. So that's what I think the first thing that stops people, any kind of this, that it's not such of a big thing that shouldn't be there, which was there for my case. It took me 3 years and some life events to realize that it's not supposed to happen. So yeah, that's how my Fulbright journey started.
Right. Thank you so much for Zinar and to Sid as well for sharing your experiences. I think Basit, you have already answered the very next question, which was about the prerequisite. If Fulbright has any prerequisite of having an outstanding academic background, and you have told us your GPA as well. But I'll also like to ask the very same question from Zinar. That Zinar, what do you think about applicants having an outstanding academic background? Is there a prerequisite or something? And I won't ask you about your CGPA, but generally, what do you think about it?
Right. I think that's a good question because many of us struggle with our current situations and when we are planning forward. So I think I I would really say that if you have a fire in your belly, and this might sound cliche, but if you have a fire in your belly, you would work hard. You would make sure that you have that clarity that Fulbright, out of so many people, would select you. People say that people who are in engineering have stronger math background, can do GRE and score well in GRE. You are from social science. I don't know what will happen. I'm from social science. I forgot. I mean, I was a math teacher, yes, but 2 years down the road, when I was working for a university, I was working in a capacity where my work was around teaching teachers how to teach, and was nothing to do with math. So 2.5 years, and I would say it in Urdu, maths is like bewafa mehbooba. So it leaves you when when you do not practice it, when you do not give time. So it left me, and I had to recap. I have to recapture, and I had to sit and work towards it. And I used to work for 3 hours a day on GRE in itself for 2 months in a row. So just because I forgot everything after like 2.5 years, 3 years of experience with the university, where my work did not involve math particularly. So I think, again, this coming back to the same cliche that I shared, I think it came real to me. If you have a fire in your belly, you know what you want to do, you build clarity on the go. As you are going forward, you will build clarity. It doesn't come from the day one. But if you are struggling towards a goal, I think you can plan out your steps. So my planning was, okay, do your MPhil, then do your GRE. I was not so sure I'll get it and I was not a very star student. Those who know me personally can really vouch for it. And I had no Fulbrighter in contact. So I was like, I'm trying. I don't know. Right. So I did my GRE saying that I'm investing these 30,000 rupees. For those who are very interested in money investments, I'm investing this 30,000 rupees. I don't know whether I'll get it or not. It was my first attempt, and I was like, I won't give TOEFL until unless Fulbright says that your GRE is okay. So at that time, TOEFL was required once you application was in process, and they say that now I think you are selected. Now you should give TOEFL. So I was not even willing to spend like 30 more thousand. I was like, no, 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 I'm not spending so much money because I don't know whether I'll get it. So I think it's at one hand, I had high level of self-doubt. On the other hand, I had clear path that I want to do it no matter what. So self-doubt can be I think encountered with that kind of clarity of goal, and that doesn't come from the day one. So you build it on the go as well.
Right, right. I think it's very well said, and you have put it very um, in the best way possible. That if you have fire in your belly, then you can do it. Um, Great. So we'll now go to our next segment, which is about applying to Fulbright. And this segment will particularly be talking about, in this segment, we'll talk about the application process itself and some of the tricks and tips of a very good application or an effective application. So the first question is, I guess you might have heard from a lot of people that how to make your application unique, how to make it catchy, how to make it something that is that comes into the very that catches the eye of the people who are looking at your application. For this, if Basit, can you go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think the question itself implicitly also states the answer. So if you want a successful application, a successful an essay or the statement of purpose that's successful that can get you into Fulbright, it needs to be unique. And by unique, it means it can only be unique if it's personal to you. If it's something that's just out there that everyone can write, no, that's not a unique one. So I think the idea behind is the statement of purpose and the application process itself is like you try to make it as personal as possible. You try to induce as personal events of your life events into it. And I've seen many of the students sometimes end up making this mistake. They even have like personal stories, but they just think it's too personal to put it into the essay or into the application process. No, no story is too personal out there. You don't have to worry that it will get published or do something, get somewhere. It will, stay there. So you need to make it personal. Plus, I think, in fact, I remember I was applying for and going through this application process, and I actually got my application reviewed by a couple of people to get their feedback. And one of the major feedback that I remember, the lesson that one of my seniors taught me was like, the the statement of purpose is specifically talking from the SOP side, from the essay. It should be something that you cannot, just simply publish it online. That you would be very comfortable in sharing with everyone. So when you have some personal events, the biggest thing that happens is that you are actually you avoid sharing it with everyone. You're not comfortable sharing it with them. So that's the essence of a successful statement of purpose that I feel like. Um, Additionally, on the top of that, I think there should be for each and every part of the application has its own purpose. So we need to know that purpose itself. So a lot of times we do a mistake of like the essays itself. We think that they are there to tell the reader that what are my qualifications, what I've done with my life, how my bibliography. No, that is not for that purpose. For that, you have your resume attached. So statement of purpose is to tell the other person about something that he doesn't know. So you need to tell them, okay, about what is it that you want to do, as we decided, where in which sector you want to make an impact, and why do we need to make an impact in this sector, and why exactly you want to make an impact. So you need to relate your own personal life with your goals as well. So you need to have those life events jot down as well. So I think that's the basic. If I have to sum it up, I would just say to make it as personal to you as possible, to make it more unique and more catchy.
Right. So to make it unique, the application should be as personal as possible. Thank you so much for sharing this, Basit. Zinar, if you can add into it, please.
I would add two points. One is inspiration. So questions around who inspired you, why, what was the inspiration that you took from somebody, uh, or now what's your inspiration, and what have you done really towards making that inspiration a reality. What are your efforts till now? So if I'm saying I want to do a PhD because I am inspired by HEC chairman because he has a PhD. So what? How are you inspired? What inspired? What was the thing that inspired you? What was the work done by him that inspired you? And then what have you done? So it's a long, I mean, for me, I built my story around my long winded teaching experience that I had from the very beginning. um, at, at the age of 5 I started teaching my sister, so I told that personal story, you know. That's how that's where my inspiration comes from. It's not from Qaid Azam sitting under the streets of light and studying. No, it's not coming from there. So wherever it is coming from, be truthful to that. It could be Qaid Azam studying under the streets of light, but it could be from your little sister whom you're teaching, and you get inspiration that if I can teach her, I can teach other people too. And that's how my very personal story became the career story and professional story. So I think that is where you get inspire other people. And then obviously I talked about my milestones and my weaknesses. Some people think that, you know, you have to shine bright in your application. I think you also need to fall short of something to say, why do you need this degree? If you are super smart, super bright, you're done. You are doing excelling in your career. But how this PhD now helps me achieve my inspiration, my goal, where is the gap? So I told them apparently that this PhD would help me gain further into academia and know my subject well. But now knowing my subject well, I didn't write that knowing my subject well. I decoded that. What exactly do I want to know? Right? And why can I not know it from sitting at home? And to tell you the truth, I wrote that down, that the research experience around instructional design and educational technology was scarce in Pakistan. So I didn't have mentors who are PhDs who are doing research on edtech in higher education and in faculty development. So that's how I went more and more specific. But you can think of your own area and then go deep down at the levels where you think that you again, the fire in your belly and the clarity that you have would convince the person next to you. If it can't convince you that you would give a scholarship to somebody, of my scholarship costs like 2.5 crores Pakistani rupees. So if you cannot think of giving 2.5 crores to somebody on your application, if somebody gives you that application, then you don't think of, you know, um, applying it before you make it very strong enough that you get it. So, and also I think I would correct myself a little. I had a Fulbright colleague who applied for 8 times in the row. So it's some of us who got it in the first time, but there are people who made continuous persistent effort to revise and see what is needed and talked to people and conversed with other Fulbrighters to get that in the journey. So yeah, I think persistence is again another thing, and showing your persistence in your career and your inspiration is also important in your personal statement.
Right. So I think this actually um, goes back to the very first question from which we started this webinar, um, that we really need to think about our timeline, our roadmap. And before that, we really need to self-reflect as to some of the points that Zinar and Basit both mentioned. What inspires us? What makes us unique? What is our story? How do we connect to the degree that we want to pursue, where are the gaps that we want to fill using the Fulbright scholarship. So it all comes in when we self-reflect and we reflect upon our career, our past, and our future as well. So I think, although I believe that this question has been answered, but I'll still ask it again in just one word. One thing that you think is very important in the application process. So, Basit, if you can just give us perhaps one word or a sentence in which you can point out that one thing.
So I think I'll be repeating myself, and it's gonna get redundant for the viewers as well. But I think how much unique in terms of how much personal it is to you. So the application process, I think that's the foremost criteria, followed by, I think, it's more than a sentence though, but what Zinar said, the inspiration itself, where you want to be. Why do we need you to be there? What's the vacuum? What's the gap that you are going to fill? So that clarity should be there as well. And ultimately it answers all your questions. If you know that I have that vision, that goal in mind, then all those questions within the SOPs requirements, SROs, everything becomes crystal clear. So yeah, I think uniqueness and in terms of how much personal it is to you. So yeah, that's
right.
I would add to one more point. I think also futuristic thinking. What do you know about jobs of future? Where would you fill the gap? Who would you be after your PhD or after your master's? So I think that piece also, and how would you serve Pakistan? Because ultimately you're not going for going away, you're coming back, and you have to convince Fulbright, for good or bad, you have to convince Fulbright that you're coming back and you're serving Pakistan. So where in Pakistan you find the gap, and how would you be instrumental in filling that gap? And you can't say that I will fix all energy problems in Pakistan. You have to be really specific on what you can do. So define your scope, and then make that claim in the and make sure that your inspiration, as Basit told us, the your own personal story, your futuristic thinking are all in line. Or even if you are swaying to something, you tell them that this is where I'm changing and this is the reason why. So again, so the more alignment that you see in the personal statement, the more catchy it becomes.
Right. So building upon that, exactly what Zinar has said right now, I think, Zinar, you have in detail already talked about your application process as to the struggle that you went through while preparing for GRE, or the entire application process. But something that you just said right now was that we have to also find out the gap in the institution or in our society or in the culture that we want the reader or the people to convince that we are coming back, we're going to fill this gap. So to make it more personal, which gap did you exactly highlight in your application while you were applying for an education sector PhD?
So very smart question. So the gap that I identified was, so I used to work for a university in a faculty development unit. So my role there was to train higher education faculty in teaching, learning, educational technology integration, and writing papers on teaching and learning. So these are, for example, medicine practitioners who are teaching medicine or teaching nursing, and so my role was to engage them in thinking about teaching, but because, as you know, nursing educators would technically be like star nurses, but not necessarily have educational hack to it, knack to it. So the educational knack to it. So that was my role. Now I specified that most of the higher education faculty in Pakistan have no training whatsoever in teaching. And that is by default, right? This is the system. That's how it works. Management faculty would not have training in teaching. So I said, in the current institution that I'm working, people do not have formal training, but also in entire Pakistan, people do not have formal training in teaching. So that's where my role comes in. If I have a PhD, and the people whom I'm teaching all have PhDs. Now you have to have that kind of, I don't know, you have to have that kind of research in depth background to be able to converse with them in research terms, and especially if you're teaching them how to do research on teaching. So I think I fell short of that kind of competency in my existing role back then. And that's where I claim that if I have my research on teaching background strengthened enough, I will be able to help faculty not only do better teaching, but inquire their own teaching and reflect their own teaching. And this becomes very personal to my story. But yeah, you can find out the gap that exists in the field and the gap that exists at your institution, and how your particular PhD or a master's would fulfill that gap. And then you can tell them about the steps. You can think about your institution, and then you can think about collaboration between universities, and you can think about HEC, working at HEC 10 years down the road after your PhD. So I actually wrote that down in my application. So, but I didn't say that I'll just go and work for HEC. I said I'll work for university for so many years, and then we'll establish some collaborations across universities. So this is how you build, even if you're detailing future, you detail future in a way that is progressive, that this is how I can do, faculty development over the years, or, fill the gap in the workforce in the years to come.
Right. I mean, that's perfect. Basit, what gap did you identify in the energy sector?
So yeah, in terms of my experience, I was actually working on, as I said, during the 3 years gap that I had between my bachelor's and my Fulbright experience, I was working for a power plant that was the first coal power plant of Pakistan. So when we started off in 2015 in Sahiwal, I was part of the first batch, and we actually went to China for a training. And there was this huge power plant where we get a training. And then there was a small plant just across, I would say it was like about 10 or 20 acres or more, but it was quite a big one and quite a huge investment just laying there. I was there for 9 months and it was not operating. It was actually carbon capture and storage technology. So basically the idea behind it was to make these coal power plants cleaner, to make it more sustainable towards that side. And I asked that question to our then Chinese colleagues, and they were like, it's just uneconomical. I was like, it's built, it's out there. The $10-15 billion investment is there on a pilot scale, and it's not operated. I mean, that's just was mind-boggling for me to understand. Okay, why is this? And then the very idea that okay, we are building these same power plants back in Pakistan, and we are building it at a pace where we have from scratch to the operation in 1.5 years, and then we add about 10,000 megawatt of capacity in 5 years. So to those who don't understand, that's about 30% expansion in our overall electricity supply. So keeping those things in our view, you get to, starting asking myself questions, and you start to realize, okay, where are we headed as a nation? Out there, all the developing countries, they are all moving towards renewable green energy and everything, but where are we headed? And that's a lot of perks came with this CPEC, but this was one thing that was like, okay, it's bringing a lot of not so clean energy along with it, and there's something that needs to be done by it. And I saw those technologies out there that were there, but non-operated just because they was economically unviable. So so we need to set our strategy right. So I didn't know the answer exactly in my case. I didn't know what the solution was. I didn't know that CCS was the solution. I didn't know because of course I didn't work in the public sector. So I knew the technicalities of all, but not in terms of the planning side. But I jot that down, identified that particular vacuum, that area where I know the problem exists. I don't know the answer, and that's why I want to go there and get expertise in this specific industry to solve this specific problem that we have. And now that I came back, I see a lot of solutions out there too. But having said that, I actually identified that particular vacuum where Pakistan's electricity grid was headed towards, energy industry was headed towards in the future due to the current progression that was happening back in 2018 and between 2015 to 2018. So that's the gap that I identified in my application.
Right, right. And just to very quick question on that as well. Basit and Zina, did you both mention this gap, this vacuum in the system in your person statement as well? You both did. And was a follow-up question asked on it during your interview as well?
So I think they in my case, my interview was one question. Then I kept on talking and talking and talking for like 10 minutes. So I said everything. I told them all my ambitions, my plans upfront. So I didn't wait for them to ask any question. At the end, they will end up like, okay, what question? So they just asked me general questions about what I want to do when I want to go to the US and what I expect from that experience. But in terms of my own personal experience, my passion, my inspirations, I just told them upfront. When they just started off with interviewing me, just tell us about yourself, and I literally told them everything. So yeah, that's how my experience went.
In my case, they actually asked questions about why do you want to do that route, go that route? That sounds so novel. I mean, nobody would think about. I said my current work forces me to think about it. Also, since it was my story, I was not hesitant talking about it. And I can talk about faculty development 3 hours right now if you make me talk about faculty development. So I was not hesitant because I had read my like research area, which is faculty development and educational technology. I had read things about it. My work was around that. My life has a kind of mysterious alignment that I think probably convinced them that she has been a teacher for 10 years now, and she's just 28. So I mean that kind of mysterious alignment that my life had convinced them. And to be honest, I didn't plan it that way. So I don't know, it happened one after the other thing. So those who are young here, like those who are at the age of 16 and 14 and 18, sometimes you start with something and then you take different routes. I started with teaching, but initially I was thinking about fashion design. Now, I mean, I'm very far from that discipline in itself. I mean, I don't embody that kind of characteristics. But later on, for some reasons, I could not go into that. So initial career path kept on changing. But once I was on one path, then I kept walking straight. So I would say that if you have a story that is your personal story, you don't find it difficult to talk about it. If it is your own work, you don't find difficult to talk about it. And also, it's not my dream is this. You're not dreaming. You're working towards your dream. You show them the work that you have done. You talk about that. And then you talk about your, I mean, they asked me, so for example, in the interview, they told me, so how would you substantiate that this problem in teaching exists across the universities? I said, I've studied at 4 universities. And I've taught at 3 universities. And more so, all the newspapers and the research articles that I read are more about disciplinary expertise, not in teaching that discipline. For example, engineering education. How many articles do you see from Pakistan on engineering education or energy education or science education? So you see more towards talking about university science in terms of, or physics, but not about physics teaching at the university level. So that's how I made my argument. So I knew the literature in the field. So I think if you're going for PhD, it's very important you know the literature as well, and you reflect that in your research statement. So there's another statement. I don't know whether it is required for masters. Basit, correct me if I'm wrong.
It is. It is.
It is. So that is another statement that is required, and you reflect your understanding of research, existing research, in that statement. So to reflect that understanding, you have to build that understanding, and it's a game of. I'm saying that I was reading literature for five years. It's not one day that I woke up and I was like, okay, now I started writing my application. Now who is saying what in my field? No, you were working in your field, so you know about it. But not to discourage all the undergrads who are thinking about masters, you can think about your masters and the field that you want to go in the third year, in the second year of your undergrad, and start reading about it. So build your capacity as you go, and then look up to your masters, even if it is Fulbright or not, that doesn't matter, but you have to convince somebody by your research statement. So build your expertise, I would say. Sorry, it went long
Right.
and
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, I would just like to add something, and
Sure.
the what like Sinar said, like she could go on speak about it 3 hours or so on this particular topic. So actually, that's exactly what they would expect from you. So if you are just going into an application process without any those mindset properly developed within your past time, and you just go there, okay, I have to, I have 2 months of process and I want to sit down, and sometimes students do come to me and do that, and they're like, I don't know what to write in my SOT, and I ask them questions, okay, what you want to do, and they're blank on that. So that's not very welcoming towards the Fulbright. What and even going past to the second stage, if you go through the first stage in the interview part, if someone asks you a question about your passion and you just give them a one sentence answer, that just shows you that it's not their passion. So that's what the importance that we talked about in the first section, that you need to have that thinking capacity and the roadmap beforehand, because once you have that in mind, you actually tend to work towards going to that goal. So you do small events, small things that could help you achieve that goal. And those are the things that you can actually mention throughout your application process. You can highlight them that, yes, I am doing this towards. So that's the only essence that I would say to sum it up. Like, it's not very favorable to go blindly into the application process just 2 months back or a month back. If you don't have these goals aligned. So at least the thinking process should start way beforehand, even for the fresh graduates, those who are thinking to apply for the immediately after the graduation.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Basit, Zinar, for this detailed conversation on the application process. I just want to highlight this thing. So the prerequisites in the application process include GRE, a person's statement of references as well. I don't exactly know how many references are exactly required for the scholarship.
So since I would suggest to go to the USCFP site to confirm
Right.
whatever we say, right? Because
Yeah.
the requirements, they change on like annual basis. Last year they had like some GPA requirement as well. So do get the updated information from them. But I think for us, the recommended number of, I think the reference letters were 3, Zinar, probably, if you can correct me. And then there is one statement of purpose required, there is one research objective required, and the GRE and TOEFL you can give, I think, after you have passed through the first initial screening stage. After that, you can get TOEFL, or before, that's upon you. So just to
Yeah,
clarify if I'm right.
yeah, I think you're right. I reached out to 5 people. I think 6 people for the reference letters whom I knew that I had connections. So you have to make connections before you know that you have, somebody can write about you. And I could not write. I mean, I could not just go and knock somebody's door and say, reference letter, please. No, that doesn't happen, right? You have to build connection, you have to work with them for some time, or even if you're their student, you need to remind them that what you have done in the course that they've taught you. You can't go to the vice chancellor if that vice chancellor doesn't know you. So the reference is about you. It's not about vice chancellor's degree or the names, the position that that person holds. It's about you. So that person should know you very closely to be able to write a reference letter. So you have to build that connection, do that work beforehand. I did submit over and above, I think 5 reference letter, because I was not sure everybody would reply, and everybody did. Out of 6 people, 5 people did reply because I had stronger connections with them. So and they go directly to Fulbright. They didn't come to me, so I got to know very late in my journey that everybody replied to the reference letters. One thing that I want to correct myself, that I said earlier, that you invest. I invested with caution that these 30,000 will go in paste, and I would say not to do it. I Having been through that experience, I would recommend people to smartly prepare, but do not think about these 30,000 or 40,000 on TOEFL, because ultimately, if I calculated, I once calculated all the money that I've spent on my education, and from the very beginning, and it was around 20 lakh rupees, because at that time money was like I had like 1,200 as a school fee. I did not study from a very bright, um, I would say very top-notch school. So yeah, it was 20 lakh investment in my entire career, and what I get out of is 2.5 crore worth scholarship, if you even talk about monetary aspects. And I'm talking this because when I talk to youth, they're like, so much of investment, I don't have it, or I don't want to make it. So see the return and then make the investment. For those who are coming from a background where you're concerned about money, make your choices very smartly, prepare well, but then make the investment in your education. That is important.
Right, right. I think that's very well said. So just 2 more questions that I guess I've received from the audience. I think since we're talking about the application process, we can take those questions up right now only. Zinar and Basit, are you aware of any age restrictions for Fulbright?
There
Um,
are, sorry, Basit, go ahead.
no, I don't know. I mean, I'm blank on that. I don't think so. I never heard of it. But I would again direct such questions to USCFP website if
Right.
there is any cap on it. But I don't know personally. So
Yeah. Just to give you anecdotal evidence, in my cohort, there were people who are around their 40s and they were applying
mm,
for PhDs. So that is possible. I also met a mother who has like 2 children. And I was suspecting that she is, I did not ask the age, obviously, but I suspect that she is in her late 40s. So she was also applying, but I'm sure that I concur with Basit that it's better to ask USEFP. You can write to them; they are good at responding as well. But I don't think so. There is any age restrictions as far as you can show that you have like 20 years to serve the country. I think you should be okay.
they have this like the eligibility criteria very clearly mentioned on their website. You can refer to that. But I'm mostly sure that there is no age, but I would still refer you guys to USCFP website.
Right. And I guess the second question is also related to this. Again, everyone who is concerned about it can always go back to the website and look into this because, as Basit had said earlier as well, the um, institution keeps on changing these requirements sometimes as well. So it's better to stay updated on the website only. But the question was simply that is there any CGPA requirement or what's the minimum CGPA requirement for applying to Fulbright?
So there wasn't any until last year. I think they changed due to some COVID issues. They actually put up some 3.5 requirement. But last I read on their website, they actually waived it for this year. But I'm telling you about 2 weeks, 3 weeks back, or a month back, maybe. But for then updated information, go to the USCFP website. But I'm pretty sure they waived it for this year, and it's actually not a requirement ever in the Fulbright process. It was just there for the last year.
Right.
And just to add on to that, I've focused on that earlier. If it is not mentioned, it is not there. So people should not start assuming that you need to have like a 3.5 or a very good GPA for that. For that matter, if it's not there in the eligibility, they are not concerned with that. If it's like you have some lower background, it's go ahead. As Dinar said, you're firing your belly, just apply for it. Make sure you have a clear path. Yeah.
Right. And thank you so much, Zina. You just shared the website as well. So yes, and of course, everyone who have any more questions as well, they can at any time email the US EFP, I guess, institutions. So I think it would be a good time for everyone who have joined us on Zoom to write down their questions on the chat box while we are talking about while we're talking with our panelists about their life as a Fulbrighter. Uh, Now, before we start this segment, I must say that we are short on time, so let's keep it as brief as possible. I know that this segment is something that would make Basit nostalgic because he's come back from US to Pakistan, but Zinar can, of course, um, still experience the US environment and and Fulbright and the perks of the Fulbright as well. But we know what are the exciting parts of the journey. We're gonna hear it from you as well right now. But while you are talking about those exciting parts, if you can also talk about those challenges and struggles that you had to went through as a Fulbrighter or as a Fulbright scholar while you were in the US. So again, as briefly as possible, this time we're gonna start with Zina. Oh, since Zina, you are still in US, so perhaps you can talk about the challenges and struggles that you are going through or you faced initially in your when you stepped into America.
इन्हीं पत्थरों पे चलकर अगर आ सको तो आओ मेरे घर के रास्ते में कोई कहकशां नहीं. I would just say that it's not very easy to acculturate yourself in a very different way that you are currently you have experienced for 28 years. I was in Pakistan. I had some international exposure because of my job, but I've never lived alone. That was the first shock, that you have to live alone and you have nobody who would look after your laundry. And these are very personal experiences. So you have nobody who can cook for you. You have nobody who can, when you come home, you have nobody to talk to. So it's a lonely journey, to be honest. And maybe you would find that then you have to do efforts because you are, as my counselor once said, you leave entire connections that you had, like entire connection tree that you had back home, and your flower potted in a different tree. So now you have to build connections with the people around you. So you're starting your life from scratch, basically. It's not that tough, but if you know that you have to do it and you have to build connections, you have to make friends, and it's a bit of cultural shock when you come here because even the vocabulary of some things are different. So I went to, and again, this is very personal experience. I went to Starbucks, and the first time when I came here, I was like, coffee. So yeah, went to Starbucks and they said whole milk or skim milk, and I'm like, what? What are you saying? I don't even understand what you're saying. So the lady repeated like 5 times, whole milk or skim milk, and I'm like, milk is milk, right? Although I knew like whole milk and skim milk exist, but I was not sure that a coffee place would ask me that question. So sometimes when you transfer to a very new country, you're finding difficult to understand their accent, their cultural values, the way they interact with each other. You find difficult to make friends, especially if you have been acculturated in a particularly different way in Pakistan. Again, it depends on which family you are coming from and how was your setup, how old are you, how and your personality as well. I mean, how flexible are you? So you have to get that kind of I would say flexibility in yourself to make new friends, to learn the culture here. And even though it is said and talked about that diversity is the talk of the day these days, that you should encourage people from diverse backgrounds, interact with them, learn to um, learn to see learn to see what they want to say or understand how they understand the world. But it's difficult, it's not that easy. um, and the work life is also, the culture is not it's it has difficulties, but also it has some benefits, I would say. Not to scare you up, I have library resources, and the office space that I'm sitting and talking to you in. And I think that's um, the blessing that I have access to excellent mentors. But I didn't really know how to talk to them when I needed help initially. So I learned on the way. So even if you come here, you put that window open that you are still learning. And you interact with your mentor. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You have to patch up with your mentors. So all that happens. Life is uh, equally interesting on both ends of the world, I would say. Basit, I think I went overboard. You can go ahead.
No, so my experience, I'll just quickly, because you talked about struggles and challenges. Honestly, my experience doesn't have many, if I could say. I could, you can say I'm the lucky one or whatsoever. Plus, I think so. The experience is unique. It's not something that my experience will probably everyone will go through, or same for the Zinars. So, experience is unique to a person's own background, from where they are coming from, and where they are actually going as well. So even in Pakistan, sorry, even in the US, where you're placed, in which state, in which university, your surrounding environment, it's quite different. When I talk to people from my cohort, so I get to realize that it's actually quite different for different universities, for different areas. Some places it's much easier. You get to socialize and meet your kind of people, like similar people as well who have the same thoughts. Some you don't. But I think essentially one of the major things that it actually gave me, not the struggle and the challenge, was the exposure and understanding the other cultures as well. I never had that experience beforehand, except for just one when I went to China. But other than that, I had none. And I went there, I had like Nepalese friend, Nigerian friend. So the kind of, so you, when you go there, don't think yourself that you are going into United States. Think yourself you're going into a global platform. At least from the place that I was. So we had like more than 60% of the postgraduate students were the international students. So you get people from all the different backgrounds, and you get to learn a lot from them. Uh, Secondly, I think the challenges and struggles you talked about, they're more dependent upon your own mindset and your own how you take about it, your own take about it. So in my own experience, I was, you can say, I had my own values that you can say I stuck to. Someone has their own values, they can stick to that. That's fine. But the openness that, everyone's responsible for themselves, that was there. So I think that was the for me personally, it was all the positive experience. And just to last point, not to go overboard, I think specifically for the Zinar case as well, and when I talk to the PhD students, it's a bit different for the PhD and for the masters. For the masters, the timeline is like, oh man, this is 2 years, it's gonna get finished, I'm gonna go back. I don't want to go back. For when I talk to some PhD students, some of them they're like 5 years, 5 years, So I think that's also a bit of a difference between the kind of programs you go to as well.
Right, right. Thank you so much, both Basit and Zinar, for sharing your views, your struggles, your challenges with us. I think the great deal that you have talked about is the cultural shock that, of course, everyone would get good who's going to who's going to go from Pakistan, let's say, to a Western society. Um, and then, of course, there's point of being flexible while also retaining your values, your cultural values as well. And at, and yes, as very well said by Zinar as well, that it's a lonely journey. So it feels like a lonely journey. Um, I can imagine that, and of course, COVID must have made it more difficult as well. So we can all feel your pains in our here as well. So we'll just move to the last question since we are almost over time now. Um, since Fawcett, you have returned from the US, perhaps you can answer this question directly. That as a Fulbright scholar, or where exactly does a Fulbright scholar stand in the job market? When you come back, where do you stand in the market?
So I think essentially, when you came back, you are just like someone person on the degree perspective. You're the same as some person, who has an abroad degree, who has done masters or things like that. But because that's not the where the actual values lie. The actual value does not lie that I got my masters from University of Maryland in energy systems, blah 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 blah. The actual values lies in two things. Firstly, the network that I came to have. So in currently where I'm working right now is basically is also a firm of another senior Fulbrighter. And similarly, you can reach out to that network with a common connection that, okay, I'm a Fulbrighter, you're a Fulbrighter. And then, you had sudden click there and then that, okay, we have spent 2 years or 5 years going through the same process, going through the same journey. So we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to discuss. And even though, there's not an opportunity, but you have a lot of, conversation that you can have over the tea or anything. So the first thing that you have is the network itself. Second, I would say is the self-worth. When I compare my experience of undergrad here in Pakistan, even from a very good university, an engineering university, and then I compared the same experience that I had there, there's a drastic difference. Coming out from the bachelor's, it was like, okay, I'm just another guy among another pool of students who will just get another job, anything that comes his way. And when you go there, you realize that you know things that you are capable of doing things that a general pool of people do not know about or are not as much capable of right now. So then that self-worth increases. And even though opportunities might not come, you are able to make one for yourself. So I think that those are the two main key things that Fulbright gave me after coming back. And that's the change of mindset. Before you, as you put up the question, where you stand in the job market, that was the question that I asked myself before going to the Fulbright. And when I came back, it's like just what I want to do. That's it. I want to do something, I get into it. And that's where Fulbright brings you. So that's the most, you can say the pro side of it after doing all the Fulbright itself is the
Right.
increase in the self-worth.
Perfect. Perfect. That's great. Zinar, briefly, if you would like to add anything, the very end of it.
Yeah, I'm again thinking about the messages that I've given as to about lonely journey. I think also the network that Basit is talking about helps you during that. So we have a Fulbright group of 2018. We have like 150 people in that, and that's and we keep on talking. You see every time there's some concern coming up regarding taxation or any other thing, we keep on talking, we keep on giving advices to each other. Some people are more closer to you than another, but overall if you see the entire group, you have small groups, but again a bigger group is like a family, so you reach out to them and you're finding it problematic. It's the place that I am placed where in the very north of America. It's a small city in New York, like New York State. It's a very small city in New York State, and it's not very well connected to the entire, other parts of the country. And I have to travel. I don't have, I would say I don't have many community connections around. So I think that, or I would say that adds to the thing, but it is not necessary that you would be placed in in the mountains and in the snow. So that the weather also does the thing to you, and then COVID, I think. So being in the current situation, I would say that I gave those messages, but considering that, if you have the network, you make new friends and you have that knack of communicating and going out around in the campus, you can build those relationships. And some of the new relationships that I've developed here, I think that are fulfilling my current needs of socialization. So I would say that you have to have a knack of developing that kind of new connections while you're here. I cannot talk about once I go back to Pakistan, how would I feel? Because I've just gone once during that, and it was only 1 month, and it was like very speeded process, and I came back. So I think, yeah, that's what I would say, that the network helps.
Right. Thank you so much, Zinar. Thank you so much, Basit, for sharing your experiences with us today. We have two questions from our audience, and after that, we're going to wrap it up. The first question is that tips to stay consistent on the pathway. I think we have talked in detail about it, but in just one line, if possible, if you can answer this question. So, Zina, we're going to start with you, and then Basit.
Tips to stay persistent. I think hope and self-worth are the two words that I would leave you with. If you have a hope that you will do something good, and if you start realizing that your self-worth, you can contribute, that how you can contribute to your family, community, and beyond to the society, I think the persistence will continue.
Perfect. Perfect. So, hope and self-worth. Basit.
So, like, I would agree with there, like, as long as you have hope, but most importantly, as long as you keep on trying. So, you know, sometimes, most of the times you end up like giving up. Okay, man, like, this is something that I've been trying for so long and it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening. As long as you have that clear goal in your mind and you keep trying, you will find a way. Just believe that you will find a way. It might not be the same way that you want to go to. If you want to get to masters, might not be through a Fulbright list, for instance, might not be something, but if you, as long as keep on trying, and as Sina quoted earlier, we do have that colleague who actually got into the Fulbright 8th year down the road. That also happens. But then again, I think what you should have in mind is the bigger goal. So where you want to be, what exactly the sector you want to work in, what impact you want to make. So do keep on asking your questions. Like, the roadmap can change. So if it might be possible that the first roadmap that you have selected for yourself, it's not suitable for you. I mean, I know it goes against the persistency, but the main goal is not to actually apply or go through that same road. Main goal is to reach that end target. So if you are able to reach that end target through some other way that you find it suitable, uh, uh, do that. And most importantly, self-evaluation. I think it's very necessary. If you fail to do something, it's very important. Not to get disheartened. In fact, self-evaluate so you don't repeat the same mistake. That is the basic thing that you should do.
Right, perfect. So we have perseverance, we have goal-centric, and we have self-evaluation, and something that we talked about earlier as well, self-reflection as well. So here we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much, our esteemed panelists, Zinar, Basit. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the information that you have shared with us today. One of this audience member was actually asking if you would be willing to share your email addresses with them, so that if they want to get in touch with you for their application process. So if you do, then please feel free to drop in your
Yep.
email address in the chat box.
I'll do that. And if you just allow me to say something from here, which I think I should have mentioned before, is basically a lot of times that people are actually reluctant on reaching out to people to help you in this process. Trust me when I say that Fulbrighters that I found, I never believed that Fulbrighters are like this much more welcoming. You reached a very unknown person, they would probably go out of the way to help you and assist you in the whole application process, even though they don't have any stakes in that. So I've seen most of, I'm not saying 100%, but most of the Fulbrighters and the people like that. So whatever you do, do reach out to people. Don't think twice. Uh, so yeah, that's about it.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much, the audience who had joined us here on Zoom, who had given us a lot of their time as well. All those who had joined us or who were watching us live, thank you so much. I hope there were a lot of things that you must have gained from this webinar. And of course, there must be a lot of things that are still unanswered, but again, it's a process. It's a process that we all have to go through. Feel free to reach out to the panelists that we have today. If you want to learn more about, if you want to know more about different careers, scholarships, do visit the website, thecareer.substack.com. And we have a YouTube channel as well, which is called Career Substack Videos. Feel free to visit the website and the YouTube channel. And again, stay tuned. We may come up with some new scholarships, new webinars, new sessions. Until then, goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone, with a share from my side. मंजिल से आगे बढ़कर मंजिल तलाश कर. मिल जाए तुझको दरिया तो समंदर तलाश कर. Do not stop. Keep going.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, I'm not a shy, so I don't have any share right now. But goodbye, everyone. I wish you best of luck for your careers.
Goodbye.
All right. Great. Bye-bye.